Hi everyone, a very warm welcome. Today we are here to discuss about a very important topic, right? The topic is basically relevance of AI for GCCs. As we all know, GCCs are expanding a base in India. Right now we are around 1600 or 1700. We envisage it will go to 2200 in a couple of years, right? And AI and GenAI is playing a pivotal role in this expansion, right? Today we have our guest here, Durjoy, who joins us from Tiger Analytics, right? And with Durjoy, we'll be discussing key pillars of this expansion, right? The key pillars being talent, partnership, the use cases, right? All of that, and definitely very important is governance, right? So we'll discuss all of it today. With that, let me invite our guest here, Durjoy. Durjoy, very warm welcome on this discussion. Durjoy, would you want to give a quick introduction about yourself before we
Sure. Thanks, Ankit, for inviting me here. As you mentioned, right, I'm part of Tiger's leadership team. I look after business for Tiger outside of North America, which is primarily, includes GCCs as well. Overall, been with Tiger for 7 years, but more than 2 decades in the data analytics world. Variety of roles prior to Tiger, including IBM and Cap One. So that's a bit about myself. And it's been a fairly long journey in terms of how the whole analytics industry have matured and where we are today. It's fairly exciting to see where we have been able to achieve, land ourselves in today's context. Thanks again for inviting me here.
Great, thank you, Durjoy. So Durjoy, I think as we know, GCCs are growing their base. And they're growing their AI missions in India, right? And as we all know, since last 1.5 years, GenAI has been the critical factor, right, which is leading the AI world. In this, what are the factors, right? Do you think which GCCs would have to really think through while creating this, missions here, growing their missions here at the same time, being honest on the capability and the ROI out of the whole mission. So
Sure.
Can you give some inputs on that?
So I think the Indian GCCs, I think why GenAI has become very, I think for lack of better word, popular with GCCs is one, obviously, it's, tech talent is obviously available in India, right? And it's not no rocket science. It has been there forever, right? But the way GenAI works out, right? You basically can do experiments on yourself, by yourself, right? In a very short span of time, right? You can basically, the dependencies are restricted, limited that way, right? The third thing, which is very important, right? Which I think today India has an advantage because the entire startup ecosystem that is here in India, right? They are experimenting a lot of things. So GCCs are able to actually take a lot of those ideas and experimenting internally in the enterprise setup, right? So that's basically, in some sense, the whole Indian ecosystem itself is playing into the whole GenAI side of things for GCCs, right? Having said that, I think for long, GCCs have worked in a very FT optimization mode, right? I think it is coming out of that, and GenAI is probably the, in my opinion, can be the turning point where basically, GCCs are seen as a more value player rather than, a cost player, right? So that's my typical perspective. Any, thoughts from you, Ankit, in case you agree or disagree with me on this?
No, I completely agree, Durjoy. I think as we are seeing, I think, and based on recent report, 80% of GCCs are building their AI missions here, AI build capabilities here, right? And they're expanding. So and the biggest leverage is definitely the talent, the innovation, and the fertile nurturing ground India is providing to them, right? So
yeah,
I completely agree on that, right?
Yeah.
Although on the adoption piece, right? I would want to get your view on adoption, right? So what I'm seeing in adoption is there's a lot of experimentation happening on GenAI, and a lot of use cases which are getting at least experimented, right? I really would want to get your view, and I have my view, but again, I would want to get your view, is that how is it getting adopted? Which use cases are you seeing getting built, right? Probably you can take some example of our industry also. I think that will be
Sure.
also a good example.
So again, that's an interesting one because that's also probably helping GCCs to do more experiments, right? A lot of the use cases are internal use cases, right? And therefore, exposure to the end consumer is obviously there are use cases which affect the end consumer, but I think there are internal use cases which the risk is low, right, for organizations. So let's say I'm building a knowledge system using GenAI. I'm building a internal search ecosystem, right? Right, correct. If I'm actually using GenAI to build my code, right? Again, obviously you can classify the code that you are writing into generic functions, generic APIs versus specialized APIs. Obviously, for specialized APIs, you would have to bring in your technical expertise for building writing those generic APIs or functions or um, features. You basically can fast forward that and nobody is going to complain, right? So that way adoption is much more with GenAI, more for the internal use cases. Obviously there are external use cases which are a lot of organizations are trying. Again, knowledge system which exposes to the end user, right? Smarter, faster and smarter chatbots for end users, right? That's where the organizations will become much more risk averse, and that's where the adoption will take its own time. But when it comes to internal applications, is faster, and GenAI is basically helps that because you get fast, low cost, and it's something that is missing today on a large scale for most of the organizations.
Yeah, absolutely on the same line, right? So what we have observed is typically 70 to 80% of the use cases are on coding, testing, documentation, internal knowledge repositories, content generation, sales and marketing, right? So this 5 to 6 use cases entail at least 75 to 85% of the work happening on GenAI. So and you said very correctly, right? Most of the GCCs, even Indian companies, enterprises, they're first experimenting internally, right?
Yeah.
And they would want to fine tune. They want to build something which is very very on lines of ethics, regulation, all of that internally, and they would want to take it later probably. But again, I think that's also gap I'm seeing. Durjoy, if you sort of suggest me, I'm not seeing a lot of GenAI applications in the real sort of use cases. Like I know drug discovery, GenAI could be fabulous, right? Like fraud detection, it could be fabulous. Beyond this, I'm not seeing that venturing, because still I think the policy and the regulation are still on the fringes, right? So Europe is going with AIA, but again, other countries still are still deliberating. Do you see the same thing?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of chatter around ethics and I would say governance, right? Forget about GenAI. There's a lot of chatter around use of AI per se, right? Obviously, GenAI is part of the whole AI, ecosystem. What's happening is there are pockets, of some of our clients who are trying to do this, right? But they are doing it in a very, very, controlled way. Yeah, in a controlled way, because basically they want to start something small, expose that to a limited set of consumers before going out, right? And they're trying to ensure that they are completely covered from a policy and from ethics, and if there are any local laws and regulations concerned, right? For example, one of our banking client, basically building a, ecosystem where some of the additional features can come in into their risk models. And these features, where are they getting generated? Through GenAI. Now, are these features, governed by the central bank of that country? That's a question that they have to ask, right? So there's that. I think it's a cautious, I say cautious optimism that I see in most of the organization. You rightly said about the drug discovery, right? Now, drug discovery is even more, is this has to be a governance there as well, right? I agree. I think the euphoria around GenAI is primarily coming from a lot of internal applications being built, but there are organizations who are basically taking the bold step. Okay, let us experiment outside also, which impacts the end my consumer, but they are doing in a very controlled way, looking at what is happening in the whole regulatory ecosystem as well, right? Because you mentioned, right, US has come out with some set of guidelines and regulations. European Union has come up with something. I'm sure India and other countries will come up with something. I've already heard something coming out in Australian market as well, right? So I think everybody is observing what is possible, what is not possible. But at the end of the day, there are people who are thinking about how to use Gen AI for a larger cause affecting their consumer.
Thank you, Durjoy. I think same lines, right? So again, I think I would want to pick your brain on steps, right? So suppose I think I've found my use case. Now I have to start thinking of implementing or probably building. What are the steps you will suggest to a GCC, right? How should they think? How should they prioritize, strategize?
Okay.
What are your views? Yeah.
So I will probably take a step back, right? Basically, the relevance of GCCs, right? As I mentioned, again, just coming back to my point one, right? Historically, GCCs have been a way for, how much FTE I am saving, right? It has to basically move forward and say, okay, I am going to create value for the organizations and I'm going to lead that rhetoric within the organization, right? So first thing first, right? The GCCs have to have a real good connect with the business, right? Right. And how you do that? Every organization, every GCCs have their own strategy to do that, right? Basically, taking leadership in, basically taking the lead when it comes to thought leadership, right? The second part is basically there will be lots of ideas that will be coming in, right? And from different pockets within the GCCs. Now, how to prioritize that? Now, prioritization can be basis, two, three things, right? One is what kind of data is available and what kind of data I can freely use without thinking about ethics and governance around it. And who can use that data? Who builds that, right? That's number one. Number two, what is the value that I can drive out of this? What is the cost saving or what is the, lift in profitability or revenue that I can get out of it, if at all I can get. Third is how much time it will take from POC to production. Yeah. So I think these are the three, four things that you need to basically design, discover first before you basically jump into the thing. At the same time, you cannot stop the whole entrepreneurial mindset of the people who are working for GCCs, right? You basically need to encourage that. Okay, can you qualify this more? Can you build more, more, I would say, content about, what you want to achieve, how you want to achieve, when to achieve, right? So basically ensuring that at the end of, before we start the execution of the POC and production, we have a fairly good idea about, what we are doing and what we are trying to achieve.
I just want to add two more areas, right? One is definitely finding a right partner and getting skilled, right? So definitely partner is very important. I think you
absolutely. Yeah, being from Tiger, I couldn't, I couldn't, agree more with you.
Yes. I don't think GCCs are right now capable of building something which is truly global and with the complex things, right? Again, companies like yours and others definitely are the right fitted partner who can really help them, right? Think through. Because definitely partners in terms of services implementation, definitely the other things, the OEMs, right? Because you definitely will have to pivot with one of the OEM, right? To at least start experimenting. And second, definitely start building your talent, right? Internal talent is very important because if you don't have internal talent, I don't think you have a very, very strong, narrator. So
In fact, I'll qualify that more. Very good points, Ankit, right? So first is partner, right? Again, this is a change that GCCs have to do, right? Again, this is probably not going to change immediately, right? GCCs typically have worked on an FT mode, right? Basically working with a partner basis, it's basically a FT transaction, right? Versus a capability or an outcome-based transaction. So the way GCCs work with partners, and this is something that we have been, talking to all our GCC clients and prospects, saying that look at us as a partner who is building your capability and driving outcomes for you. Then it becomes much more meaningful for both the parties, right? That's number one. Number two, from a talent standpoint, right? I think again, some GCCs are already doing that, right? How do you assess your internal talent who can basically be upskilled for GenAI or AI per se? And that's very critical because you can't go and hire in the market all the time. If you are only depending on hiring from the market, you basically are going to be 3 months, 6 months, 1 year behind the curve, right? You need to have a very strong assessment tool internally to assess who can be upskilled for doing, AI or Gen AI related, activities.
Great. I think great point. I think we are probably near the end of the discussion. Probably I will ask you two more topics probably, and then we might have to end. But again, I think one major part I would want to ask is, what are the challenges you see, right? So again, we discussed what could be the steps or levers. But again, what are the challenges you see while any GCC or any enterprise is trying to build a Gen AI practice or use cases? What are the challenges you see your customers are facing, and how do you try to help them?
Okay, there are two things. I'll from a challenges from a GCC standpoint and challenges from an organization standpoint, right? Challenges from GCC standpoint is very simple. You need to have a direct connect with the business so that you basically become a partner there. It cannot be, there should not be someone in between who is basically translating what business needs and giving it to you. Yeah. So that becomes then more like a, subcontracting within the larger organization, right? And therefore you don't throw your thought leadership there. From an organization standpoint, I think we need to start thinking about, what after POC, right? There are very few and rare instances where companies have gone into the productionization side of things, right? And we have seen some of the clients who have gone there, right? That's an area that I think larger organizations have to think about, right? Of all these POCs, Gen AI related, pilot proof of concept that you're building, how do I productionize this so that you start getting the benefits out of it? If you're doing it in an experiment in a lab setup, it's fine. You prove the point that it derives value, but it's basically all about productionization of Gen AI applications that you are building.
Yeah, I think very important, business and specifically the exec support, right? You're getting from the top.
Absolutely.
That's very important.
Yeah.
The other point which I would want to add is, when you start to strategize about any AI use cases, and specifically you think of the ROI, right? You will not have the answer day one, but again, it's like an iterative work you do on the way, right? If you don't see ROI, you fail fast, right? That's, I think, something which I will recommend, right? So I hope you also see the same thing.
Absolutely. So basically, as I mentioned, right, is how much value you can drive out of it and how complex and what is the time frame in which you can drive the value.
Yes. Probably the last question is on the governance piece, right? So when any of the GCCs they're trying to build AI or Gen AI, I think there are certain guardrails they will have to think, right? What do you recommend to your customers or your set of internal?
So I think there are 2 or 3 best practices that I have observed, right? One is some of basically having some kind of a control tower of all Gen AI or AI, forget about Gen AI, all AI implementation or experimentation that is happening and what stage it is in. It's basically become a kind of a dashboard for your CDAO or CIO or CO, whichever is who is responsible for overall data initiatives, right? So that way you can basically track, right? These are the things that we are doing. These are the things that we have assumed or presumed before we started this, right? And where have we achieved, right? That is very important because then you have a track of what is happening so that you are not duplicating it and you are not losing the idea with time, right? That's number one from a governance standpoint, right? And how many of them are cross-functional, how many of them are specific to any function. So that determines which is my strategic initiative and which is probably a functional initiative, right? That's number one. Number two, what I have seen is more and more companies are setting up AI ethics committee, right? Just like you have your compliance team in banks, right? Similarly, the organizations which are at the forefront of AI or data initiative, they're basically creating almost an independent AI ethics committee, right? So all the experiments that you are trying to do, it needs to somehow get a certification from the that AI ethics committee pre and post, right? So that's basically two observation that I have seen from some of our clients.
So probably let me add a few thoughts, right? So when we work with a lot of startups and enterprise and GCCs, I think we pivot the governance means on 9 pillars, right? First is definitely inclusivity and non-discrimination. Second is reliability, safety. Third is privacy, security, transparency, explainability. Seventh is accountability. Eighth is protection of human values. And definitely ninth, which is very important, is compliance with the local regulation, right? So I think these are 9 pillars we recommend, right? And
that's a very comprehensive one. Yeah, absolutely.
And as you rightly said, I think ethics committee and that is sitting out of the technology team, which has a multi point or multi stakeholder internally who is observing. I think that's very important. So so one is the aspect what you're seeing as a pillar. Second is external inside view, where you are really monitoring how you're implementing.
Absolutely.
That's what I think we recommend.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't agree more with you on that.
Yes, great. I think probably our time is up, and I had a great discussion with you, Durjoy, and I hope all of our audience also would have enjoyed the discussion. Thank you so much, Durjoy.
Thanks, Ankit. It's been a pleasure to talk to you, and I hope this is useful for the audience as well.